So we've talked about how growing up I was a UFC kid. And I didn't get the internet until like way later than you'd think. I had heard like all the cool kids talk about this Japanese company that's way better than the UFC and that's where all the good fighters are. But I had never actually watched it myself. Why did it take me so long to catch up on Pride? And why did I choose to do it now? Well, first things first, you guys voted for it on our YouTube channel. Second things second, it's June, it's Pride Month, and you know I can't resist a pun. The name is Pride Final Conflict 2003. The time was November 9th, 2003. The place was the Tokyo Dome in Tokyo, Japan, which means every fight today gets one more star, according to Dave Meltzer. An attendance of 67,450, which is absolutely insane for an MMA event. And our commentary team is Damon Perry and Bas Rutten himself. Now, Pride has no undercard fights. Everything you see is on the pay-per-view itself. And because if I did a whole rundown on every single fight, we would be here forever, and I have to make this sucker fit into 15 minutes, or my editor will yell at me. We're just going to do kind of the major fights, all of the tournament fights, and then one or two more just to feel special. And our first fight on the card is one of the ones we're going to gloss over a little bit. It's Gary Goodridge versus Dan Bobish. This sucker lasts all of 18 seconds as Gary Goodridge lands a series of uppercuts onto Bobish, who starts complaining about an eye issue instead of blocking, as this one is a TKO in 18 seconds of the very first round. And our first fight in the Middleweight Grand Prix semi-finals is UFC legend Chuck Liddell versus Quinton Rampage Jackson. So how did this end up the way it did? Well, Dana White wanted to prove that the UFC is where the best fight, and he claimed that any UFC fighter could walk through Pride's Grand Prix and come out the other side a winner. He was so sure of this that Living Tomato Dana White will actually be on commentary for this entire fight. Rampage throws a big swinging hook that clips Chuck but doesn't seem to do much damage. Both guys are throwing heavy, and Chuck lands a big left kick to the leg, and Quinton goes for the takedown. Chuck's defense seems to be face first, and hoping that his cinder block head is tough enough to withstand it. Chuck lands an overhand right and gets by Quinton Rampage Jackson. Dana White is already beside himself with how well Quinton Rampage Jackson is doing. Another heavy couple of shots by Jackson. Another heavy shot that knocks Chuck back, and it looks like he's going to go for a big slam. He does kind of get Chuck up in the air, but Chuck fights his way out of it. A couple of huge shots stuns Liddell. Rampage picks him up again for the slam, but Chuck tries to grab onto the ropes to keep himself up. Jackson finds himself in guard. Chuck turns himself over, gets onto his hands and knees, but gets a knee for his trouble. Jackson lands a right hook that knocks Chuck down to the ground. Chuck's nose is broken, and Jackson smells blood in the water trying to finish it, but the round ends. Jackson once again goes for the 1-2 to the face, but then a takedown attempt that Chuck defends. It looks like Chuck's fatigue has really started to get to him as Jackson lands a right hand followed by a knee. Back off into the corner now, Quinton uppercuts his way out of it and down to the ground. A couple of brutal shots by Jackson. I don't know if Liddell is trying to Homer Simpson his way through this thing, but it doesn't work until eventually the corner throws in the towel, and that is game. I'm going to give this one an 8 out of 10. I love Chuck Liddell. He is one of my favorite fighters, if not my favorite fighter of all time. But I don't know if it's that 10-minute first round, but after that, he had nothing. Are the rules really that different that Chuck can't handle it? But no, he beat Alistair Overeem just a little bit ago. So, like, you knew what you were walking into. In the second round of the semifinals of the Middleweight Grand Prix, we go from a UFC legend to a Pride legend. It's Wanderlei Silva versus Hidehiko Yoshida. They start out with a feeling out process, and then Silva starts swinging, but Yoshida immediately goes for the takedown up against the corner. Yoshida spends a lot of time on top of Wanderlei. He gets a couple of good shots in, but then Wanderlei starts throwing the up kicks to try to get him away. Wanderlei goes in for the triangle choke, and he gets it in fairly deep, but Yoshida is fighting to keep his head above water. Wanderlei gets the mount, but once again goes into the ropes, and they get turned around and reset. Wanderlei, after not being able to make any headway on the ground, stands up. They have a bit of an exchange, and Yoshida gets a judo takedown. He lands in half guard and starts to rain some shots down on Silva's face. He tries to go in for a neck crank and gets it fairly deep, at least the crowd seems to think so. But Silva gets an up kick to the dome just as the bell rings. Round 2, Yoshida goes for a single leg takedown, but they get sprawled upon by Silva. He gets a left head kick. They exchange off in the corner. Yoshida trying once again for that judo takedown, but Silva's a little bit smarter this time. Silva has woken the fuck up. And then both guys just start throwing wild punches at each other into the corner. Yoshida goes in for a takedown, but gets another knee to the face. Somehow he survived that. The commentary disagrees as to who the winner is. Bas Rutten says Silva, Perry says Yoshida, but the judges seem to like Bas Rutten, as it is a unanimous decision for Wanderlei Silva, who we will see again in the main event against Quinton Rampage Jackson. I'm going to give this fight an 8.5. The best way I can put it is calm and then a storm. You get about 20, 30, maybe sometimes 40 seconds of like setup and positioning, and then they go at each other like two rabid cats. Wanderlei Silva, his knees to the body and to the head are so effective and so violent that you can't help but be entertained. In non-tournament news, Baby H-Bomb Dan Henderson defeats Murilo Bustamante in 53 seconds by TKO. And future perennial, hey, that guy still works here, UFC stalwart Heath Herring defeats Yoshishisha Yamamoto in the third by rear naked choke. Coming up next in a non-tournament bout, for the very first time on the show in any of its iterations, we get to see the legend himself, the Gracie Killer, Sakuraba versus Kevin the Monster Randleman. Round 1, a slow start, but Sakuraba gets the first punch thrown directly into the mush of Randleman, followed up by a high kick that doesn't quite hit. Randleman quickly lands a couple of shots and then goes in for a single leg takedown, which after a little work he does manage to get. Sakuraba, while he is on the bottom, is controlling Randleman's hand, so he really can't do much in this position except get a couple of knees in. Randleman lands one hell of a leg kick that knocks Sakuraba off balance. He scrambles in for a takedown and he gets it, but Randleman's arm is in danger of submission and Sakuraba works for it. But outside of that, a whole lot of nothing has been going on. Even Bas Rutten is begging for the referee to stand in and break it up, but break it up he does not. Round 2, it sounds like Sakuraba was bored too, as he starts with a 1-2 combo that gets countered with a swift punch from Randleman. Sakuraba goes for a high head kick that gets caught and he gets put back down on his back. It looks like Sakuraba tries almost for a rubber guard or the beginning of a triangle choke, but nothing really happens, which has been the story of this fight. Round 3, Sakuraba goes back to the low kicks, and Randleman catches one of them and goes in for a takedown. Randleman slams him down to the ground, and he has a brutal waistlock on him. Sakuraba then goes in for what looks to be a Kimura of some sort, but he gets flipped around and turned it into an armbar, a quick turn, and he gets it. Sakuraba gets the armbar tap out at 2:36. I labored over how to score this fight, and I landed on a 3.5, which I believe is the lowest score I've given so far. Guys, nothing happened here. It is literally, they are on the ground and nobody's doing nothing. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the Fedor fight we did a couple of months ago, in that I know this guy is a legend, I know he is at the top of his game, but I am not watching the best example of that, and I think that's the best way to put it. Coming up next, we got a real Rocky-style underdog story for the Pride Interim Heavyweight Championship. It's Big Nog versus Mirko Cro Cop. Big Nog goes in for the takedown, but he gets immediately sprawled upon by Cro Cop. Nogueira tries to pass guard, but Cro Cop is surprisingly resilient in his ground game. But after that, Mirko gets up and lets him stand up. Cro Cop lands that left high head kick, and then followed by a kick to the body, with Nogueira somehow avoiding a trip to the cemetery. Afterwards, Nogueira tries to go in for a takedown, but he gets thrown aside. Nogueira, however, is still moving well as he slips a couple of heavy shots from Cro Cop, but once again, Cro Cop doesn't take the bait of going back down to the ground. As the round ends, he lands that left leg cemetery to the face, and Nogueira drops to the ground, but it looks like he was saved by the bell. We talk a lot about the damage that Cro Cop caused, but what about the damage that Nogueira can take? At the start of round 2, he finally gets that takedown, and the Tokyo Dome goes nuts. Cro Cop reaches around the upper body, but he's still taking an absolute beating here in the early part of round 2. Cro Cop tries to buck him off, and he does, but he bucks him off right into an armbar. What a crazy finish, and Nogueira is the new interim heavyweight champion. This fight, it's not blazing fast, it is not constant action, but all of the action is significant. It is such a great fight. One of the fights to watch if you watch this card. We'll get to that at the end. And finally, in our main event of the evening, it has all come down to this. It is Quinton Rampage Jackson versus the axe murderer Wanderlei Silva. And we start off with a quick attack. It looks like Jackson was going to powerbomb him, and then I remembered what sport I was watching. Silva stays busy on the ground, but he's getting dominated by heavy shots to the head and to the body. Jackson lands a couple of heavy shots, but leaves himself open for an armbar that Silva almost gets, and starts landing those brutal knees to the head and body until the referee stands and breaks them up. Jackson goes in for another takedown, but he doesn't get it. Another brutal kick by Silva, followed by knees in the tie clinch. Jackson does get to his feet, but then gets another knee for his trouble. The referee calls for it, and Jackson finally falls over. Wanderlei Silva is the winner of the Pride 2003 Middleweight Grand Prix. This is a 9 out of 10, and one of the most violent finishes I've ever seen. The amount of punishment Jackson takes, these knees could crack any man's skull open. And honest to God, he took 7, 8, like 9 in a row to the face. This fight, this tournament actually, has been so much fun to watch. And this is such a great way to cap everything off. Overall, I am going to give this card an 8.5. I thought about giving it a 9, but I think the Sakuraba Randleman fight just brings it down too much. The co-main and the main are some of the most exciting and interesting fights I think I've ever seen. But unfortunately, I truly can't tell you the amount of fuck all that happened in that Sakuraba fight. This has been an eye-opener, and I can see why all the MMA nerds back in the early 2000s were all over Pride. And I kind of regret not getting into it earlier, but boy, am I here now. But what did you think? Did you watch this card? Did you watch Pride when it was the big thing? Did you come into it later in life like I did? What do you think about the difference between, Pride then and the UFC now? Let us know what you think in the comments down below, or you can go ahead and find us on any social media. We are at It's Not Cagefighting, no matter where you look. And if you really like what's going on and you want to have a say in how we do things, you can go to patreon.com/itsnotcagefighting. Any amount of money will get you some really cool stuff, including these videos earlier. You can see Q&As, the whole kit and caboodle. And if you want to kick in $10, I will go ahead and do any fight card you wish. You will get your own retro review, just like the one you're seeing now. So if you're feeling it, go to patreon.com/itsnotcagefighting. We would really, really appreciate it. But until then, thank you all very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed watching this as much as I enjoyed making it, and we will see you next time.